So with the two fighters fighting this weekend, we're hearing more talk of a possible fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and James Degale. Chris Eubank Jr. is fighting JJ McDonough tomorrow night on the undercard of George Groves, Callum Smith in the World Boxing Super Series final in Jeddah. And we've James Degale on Saturday. And the funny thing is, James Degale's fight, is not even going to be televised. It's happening that early in the bill. Now, I find that quite incredible to think that only the fight before he was winning back his world title, and now he's in an 8-rounder against, I don't even know who his opponent is yet. I don't even know if they've announced it. They probably have, I haven't checked it. But I know it's not even going to be televised. It's just going to be one of them kind of starting in the stadium, which is reserved for prospects who are making their debuts. You got a former world champion. He's going to be fighting on that. And Eubank Jr., I can imagine that's the co-main event, because I have not seen anything on the George Groves, Callum Smith undercard that suggests this fight or this card's going to be any good. So I can imagine that's the co-main event against JJ McDonough, whose claim to fame is knocking out Jake Paul in a round. That was a nice knockout, in fairness. Jake Paul, he's a prospect, or was. I don't know what he is now anymore. But yeah, it was a nice knockout. JJ McDonough comes to fight, but realistically, you should imagine Chris Eubank Jr. should dispatch him with relative ease. This is a weird fight, because in one hand you have James Degale, who is the more technically skilled. He is the more, I would say, talented boxer. Eubank Jr. be the more talented athlete. In terms of punching power, I would say they're both the same. They're not known, either one of them, for being big punchers. Eubank Jr. throws a lot more shots, but he can be very sloppy. He's very good against come-forward fighters who square their shoulders so he can get off the uppercut. Eubank Jr. can't really box at long range, and I think that's where a trainer, like, I know he's been training with I think Floyd Mayweather Sr. That's where like a trainer like Adam Boot would have came in last year when he was with Adam Boot, because Adam Boot is very good at teaching outside boxing, and Eubank Jr. lacks that. But Adam Boot isn't very good at teaching inside boxing, but Eubank Jr. already had that. So I think someone like Adam Boot would have been great for him. Mayweather Sr. might be still good for Eubank Jr. He really needs to listen. I rate Eubank Jr. very highly. He's not my favourite boxer in terms of personality-wise, but in terms of just value for money to watch, he's fun to watch. But the biggest worry I have with Eubank Jr. is that when he fights boxers, and I mean boxers who can box, he struggles. And when he's on the big stage in a big fight, he falls apart and he's just as sloppy as anything. Like we saw against Billy Joe Saunders and like we saw against George Groves in the last fight. That's the worrying thing. But Eubank Jr., he's actually sounded a bit more humble, I think, since the George Groves loss. He's just saying, look, me and James, we need to do our own things. But there's one thing I'll tell you, I live the athlete lifestyle and James Degale doesn't, which is true. There have been a lot of stories about James Degale not living the athlete lifestyle. And James Degale, as good as he is, he lets his ego get in on him too much. And he makes mistakes. And he makes fights harder than they need to be. And for the last few years, he's been having tough fight after tough fight after tough fight. The Caleb Truex fight, the last fight, he done a lot of illegal tactics in that fight. The fight before that, he took a lot of punishment. The fight before that was Badu Jack. He took a hell of a lot of punishment. I thought he lost that fight. The fight before that, he fought Porky Medina. That was a close fight. I just gave that fight to Degale. I remember watching that fight. I was thinking, what the hell's going on in this fight? Even the fight before that, it was Lucian Bute, and that was a tough fight. So James Degale, James Degale, especially, I know it's in the Porky Medina fight, for the first few rounds, he just has it his own way. But I think James Degale has this kind of, I don't want to say if it's a cockiness or maybe it's mentality that he's a puncher and that, give it a few rounds to get him out of there. Then they're not out of there because he's not much of a puncher. And then he's like, crap, what do I do? And these guys are swarming all over him. Someone like George Groves, he has the power to keep them guys off for 12 rounds if he needs to. Degale doesn't have that. Eubank Jr. is showing a decent chin. He was dropped in the George Groves fight. It wasn't a full-blown knockdown, but he was down unofficially in that fight. And, he's shown some vulnerabilities there. He shows vulnerabilities on the big stage. But do I think at this stage he could beat a James Degale? I think he probably could. I think James Degale's gone as far as he's going to go. And I think James Degale at this stage is looking for a big money fight, because he could have defended his IBF title against this guy, who I think is a very good fighter. And I think there's a very high chance Degale could have lost that fight. And if he loses that fight, what else does he have? I mean, he wouldn't have made as much money as he would for fighting Eubank Jr. If this fight happens. Not saying it has. He would have, lost to his category. He's a good boxer, but he's not a big name. And where would he have gone? So I think this makes sense for both fighters. I think that if this fight gets announced for December, I will be picking Eubank Jr. to win the fight on points. But hesitantly, I don't know what kind of Eubank Jr. might turn up. If Eubank Jr. I'm trying to think, if the Eubank Jr. who fought someone like Arthur Abraham or Spike O'Sullivan turns up, he beats James Degale. If the Eubank Jr. who fought Billy Joe Saunders or George Groves turns up, then we have an interesting fight on our hands. Then things could get good. So it just depends what Eubank Jr. turns up, I think. And, if the fight gets announced, I'll be going for Eubank Jr. Would I rule out a Degale win? No. But right now, I'll be going for Eubank Jr. So there are my thoughts on this fight. I hope this fight gets made because it does seem like quite a good fight. Well, that wasn't my thoughts on this fight. Like I said, I'll have to see what Eubank Jr. looks like during the week or over the weekend. I won't get to see what James Degale's looking like because the fight's not going to get televised. So I'll reserve judgment on it. I'll see kind of whether he stops this guy, because if it's an 8-rounder, I can't imagine the guy's going to be too good, so I'm sure he could get a stoppage. And we'll see what happens. So those are my thoughts. That's pretty much it for tonight.